You know what's absolutely wild? There's a steam locomotive out there that weighs over 1 million pounds, stretches longer than 2 city buses end to end, and was so powerful it could haul a fully loaded freight train over mountain passes that would make other engines give up. I'm talking about the Union Pacific Big Boy, and honestly, this thing is less of a train and more of a rolling testament to human engineering ambition gone beautifully, magnificently overboard. So let me paint you a picture. It's the late 1930s, and Union Pacific has a problem. They're moving freight across the Wasatch Mountains in Utah and Wyoming, and their current locomotives, they're struggling. Like, really struggling. They need 2 or even 3 engines working together just to get heavy trains over these steep grades. That's expensive, it's slow, and it's a logistical nightmare. Union Pacific goes to the American Locomotive Company and basically says, "We need something bigger, way bigger." And the engineers at ALCO, they took that challenge personally. They sat down and designed what would become the largest, most powerful steam locomotive ever built for actual service. Not a prototype, not a one-off experimental machine, but a real working locomotive that would haul real freight for decades. 25 of these monsters were built between 1941 and 1944, and they designated them as the 4000 class. Now, here's where the name Big Boy comes in, and I love this story because it's so perfectly human. Legend has it that during construction, some worker at the Alco factory in Schenectady, New York, took a piece of chalk and scrawled Big Boy on the front of the first locomotive, and that name just stuck. Union Pacific tried to call it other things, had official designations and everything, but nope, everyone called it Big Boy, and eventually Union Pacific just gave up and made it official. Sometimes the best names are the ones that just happen organically. Let's talk about the sheer scale of this thing because the numbers are genuinely mind-blowing. A Big Boy locomotive is 132 feet long. That's longer than a blue whale, longer than most houses, longer than a lot of swimming pools. It weighs 1.2 million pounds, or 600 tons, just for the locomotive itself. Add in the tender, which carries the coal and water, and you're looking at over 1.1 million pound total. This is not a vehicle. This is a mobile building. The boiler alone is massive. We're talking about a firebox that's over 235 square feet, which is bigger than some studio apartments in major cities. The fire tubes running through the boiler total over 5,800 square feet of heating surface. This thing could generate steam at 300 pounds per square inch, and it burned through coal like you wouldn't believe. On a single run from Ogden, Utah to Green River, Wyoming, a Big Boy would consume about 22 tons of coal and 24,000 gallons of water. 24,000 gallons. That's enough water to fill a small swimming pool, and the Big Boy would go through that in just 175 miles. But here's what makes the Big Boy truly special from an engineering standpoint. It's an articulated locomotive. See, most steam engines have all their wheels on a single rigid frame, which is fine for small engines, but becomes a real problem when you're building something this massive. A rigid frame that long would never be able to go around curves. So the Big Boy uses something called a simple articulated design. The front set of driving wheels can pivot independently from the rear set. It's basically 2 engines in one, both using steam from the same boiler, but mechanically they can move semi-independently. This means the Big Boy could navigate curves that a rigid locomotive of the same length would never manage. And the power output? Oh man, the power output. is where things get really impressive. The big boy could produce 6,290 horsepower. But here's the thing about steam locomotives. Horsepower isn't really the number that matters most. What matters is tractive effort, which is basically how much pulling force the engine can generate at the wheels. The big boy could produce 135,375 pounds of tractive effort. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to 135 pickup trucks all pulling in the same direction. That's the kind of force that could move a freight train weighing over 6,000 tons up a mountain grade. Union Pacific put these locomotives to work primarily on the route between Ogden, Utah, and Green River, Wyoming. This was the most challenging section of their transcontinental line, crossing the Wasatch Mountains with grades as steep as 1.55%. Now, that might not sound like much, but in railroad terms, that's brutal. For every 100 feet you travel forward, you're climbing about 1.5 feet upward, and you're doing it while pulling thousands of tons of freight. The big boys were specifically designed to conquer this route, and conquer it they did. These locomotives were primarily used to haul freight during World War II and the post-war boom. We're talking about trains loaded with everything from raw materials to manufactured goods, agricultural products to military supplies during the war years. The big boy made it possible to move more cargo with fewer trains, which was crucial during a time when the American economy was running at full throttle and every bit of transportation capacity mattered. But here's something that makes me a little sad. The big boys had a relatively short working life. The last one was built in 1944, and by 1959, they were all retired. Just 15 years of service for most of them. Why? 2 words. Diesel-electric. Diesel locomotives were cleaner, more efficient, required less maintenance, and didn't need to stop every 100 miles for water and coal. The writing was on the wall for steam power, and by the late 1950s, Union Pacific was converting their entire fleet to diesel. The age of steam was over, and the big boys were victims of progress. But here's where the story gets really cool. 8 big boys were saved from the scrapyard. Most of them ended up in museums and railroad heritage sites around the country. You can see Big Boy 4012 at the Steamtown National Historic Site in Pennsylvania, 4017 at the National Railroad Museum in Wisconsin, 4018 at the Museum of Transportation in Missouri, but the star of the show, the one everyone talks about, is number 4014. Big Boy 4014 was donated to a railroad museum in Southern California in 1962, where it sat on display for decades. But in 2013, Union Pacific did something absolutely incredible. They announced they were bringing 4014 back to life, not as a static display, not as a cosmetic restoration, but as a fully operational, fire-breathing, steam-making, freight-hauling locomotive. Union Pacific Steam Team spent years rebuilding 4014 from the ground up, replacing worn parts, upgrading systems to meet modern safety standards, and basically giving this 70-year-old machine a complete mechanical rebirth. In 2019, Big Boy 4014 steamed again for the first time in 60 years. Union Pacific ran it across their system for special events and promotional tours. And let me tell you, when this thing fires up and starts moving, it's something else. The ground shakes. Steam hisses from every valve, smoke billows from the stack, and you can feel the raw mechanical power radiating from it. It's like watching history come alive, this connection to an era when machines were massive, visible, and undeniably powerful. Today, 4014 is the largest operating steam locomotive in the world. Union Pacific still runs it occasionally for special events and anniversary celebrations. When it rolls through towns, thousands of people line the tracks to watch. There's something about the big boy that captures the imagination in a way that modern trains just don't. Maybe it's the sheer scale, maybe it's the visible drama of steam and fire, or maybe it's just the fact that it represents a time when we built things not just to be efficient, but to be impressive. The big boy represents peak steam locomotive technology. It's the result of over a century of railroad engineering evolution, pushing the limits of what was possible with steam power right before the technology became obsolete. It's a monument to American industrial might, to the ambition of building a transcontinental railroad system, and to the engineers and workers who designed and built these incredible machines. So yeah, the Union Pacific Big Boy. 1 million pounds of steel, fire, and steam, an engineering marvel that conquered mountains and moved the American economy during some of the most crucial years of the 20th century. And thanks to Union Pacific's dedication to preservation, it's still out there, still running, still reminding us that sometimes bigger really is better.